Oh, my goodness. It is December. It is the climax of the college football season on the field, and it's a hell of a lot more than that off the field. Welcome, everybody. JC and Morgan, episode number 152. He's JC Shurburtt at 24/7, Mike Morgan at the ESPN, SEC Network, and as usually is the case, the man with the plan over there in the Music City, Michael Haney, our de facto producer here on this fine award-winning podcast. You'll hear from him in just a moment and kind of set the table up with the top subjects of the day. The Hot Haney 5 will still be there. You can take a guess what's going to start things off. That wouldn't even be considered number one. We need to come up with a new subject line for that. But yes, we will talk about what I think we all agree is a landmark day. We're not one for hyperbole on this podcast, but what happened in about a 36-hour span just a couple of days ago, we're recording this, I should mention, on Wednesday morning, because by the time you hear this, jobs like Notre Dame, jobs like Oklahoma might be filled, might not, we don't know, but certainly that's got to be coming down the pike soon. But what happened in that 36-hour span, it's not your typical coaching chaos. It is to have two coaches leave bell cow programs, blue blood programs like Notre Dame and Oklahoma, and they're not going into probation. They're not coming off of bad years. Notre Dame could conceivably make a playoff. I don't think they will. Oklahoma was within seconds of winning another Big 12 championship. I mean, both programs are on terrific footing, but both those coaches said, no, I want something different. That is just that is cataclysmic. It's a new deal, and we'll talk about that. We'll actually talk about some games going on this weekend. It's amazing that the action on the field. I mean, we got Georgia, Alabama, which is promises to be one of the best SEC championship games we've had. And it's like, yeah, we'll get to that when Saturday rolls around. But what about all that coaching news? And then we'll talk about some of the other leftover news that is still very important. It's just been buried. So with all that, I say hello to you, gentlemen. JC, how are you?
Doing well, man. It has been. I've been covering college football for, 20 years. Never seen anything like this. And it's usually a action-packed time in the coaching carousel right now with everything else, recruiting and all that. And there's just massive upheaval. And I figured that with the portal and all that, transfer portal and stuff this year from a player standpoint. But a lot of this stuff coaching wise is very unprecedented.
Very impressive. And it overshadowed. Oh, by the way, we had rivalry week and there were some pretty good rivalry games.
Epic games.
And kudos to Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. You and I have been talking about this for a while. There's a lot of hate out there for khaki pants. I get it. He's gruff. He's not the most charismatic guy. He puts his foot in his mouth, and I think some people, quite frankly, just don't like him. And so they have reveled in his struggles to defeat Michigan. And so many have said he needs to be fired, and he's kind of had a little personal squabble with Paul Feinbaum over the years. I'll just repeat this. I think it's good for college football that Michigan is not just relevant, but like Final Four relevant. I think Jim Harbaugh is good for college football. I have no dog in that fight every year it's played, but I love good storylines. Michigan finally winning and getting that monkey off the back is a good storyline to me. Oklahoma State Bedlam was fantastic. Those two games kind of stole the show on rivalry week. All right, we're going to get all this in an hour and change. We could go 3 hours today, but we're not. So, Michael, welcome. Hope you are doing well from whatever excursion you just had that I'm sure involved a guitar, a bottle of whiskey, and gosh knows what else. But welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. You are not far off. That's we've known each other far too long.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, I can't even
right.
joke about that. He was actually correct on every single bit of that.
Nothing wrong with it. Not judging. In a way, I'm jealous.
Yes, I understand. One day we'll all get to enjoy those fruits together at some point. But just like all of you, I was glued to rivalry week and the fascination that turned into Sunday and into Monday as well with what's going on in the seismic shift in college football. And guys, just what does it say about the state of college football right now that we see Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly both jumping ship from their respective blue blood programs, as you said right at the outset, Mike?
I'll start that off, JC, and I'll try to keep this short because I have so many very powerful thoughts swirling through my limited brain size here, and I'll try to get them all out without sounding like word vomit. Here's my top takeaway. I have said for years on this podcast and other venues that these programs, these Power 5 programs, and particularly the upper echelon Power 5 programs, they have all the cash. They have the money. So typically speaking, when you have a great coach and you want to keep him, you're not going to lose him to money. I mean, even Matt Campbell at Iowa State, take a look at his salary. Take a look what Mel Tucker just signed at Michigan State based on one good year and getting just absolutely eviscerated against Ohio State by 42 points right around that time. And he's making $9.5 million a year. That to me set the whole salary structure in orbit, the James Franklin deal, by the way. But this to me, and I know people will disagree with me, this is not just a money grab because Notre Dame's got a ton of money. I mean, if they really, really wanted to start matching up funds, I believe they could. Oklahoma has a lot of money. These weren't money moves. These were moves by coaches that saw the opportunity to have next level success at the other destinations. Notre Dame wins 10 games a year under Coach Kelly. He's done a terrific job. 92-39, 5 consecutive 10-win seasons. Only other program that's done that is Alabama. But whenever he gets to a BCS title game or a college football playoff, he looks across at that other sideline and he says, I'm about to get my ass kicked. And that's what happens. And it's not because he didn't come up with a great game plan. It's because those players on the other side are better than his players. And he knew that. Oklahoma, again, they could dominate the Big 12 as they have. And obviously the SEC would be a different story. And no, I don't think Lincoln Riley was afraid or scared of the SEC. I think he looked at Southern Cal and he said, holy smokes, that's a classic underachiever. And I can go ahead and bring Southern Cal back to what Pete Carroll had. And I can't do that at Oklahoma. Easier job to recruit. JC, who are the top 2 quarterbacks in the SEC this year? I've got a Heisman ballot that I've got to fill out. There's a good chance these two gentlemen will be on it. If I were to ask you, who do you think the top 2 QBs in the Southeastern Conference are this year?
I'd say Bryce Young. I'd probably say Stetson Bennett, man.
Well, I like Stetson, but what about that guy in Oxford?
Give me your other guy. Matt Corral.
Matt Corral, right? I mean, they don't win.
No brainer. Yeah, I should have said Matt.
That's
Corral.
okay. I mean, actually, you're not the first person to do that
because I would be tempted if he wins. To vote for Stetson Bennett for Heisman. I think it's a great story, but you're right. Matt Corral and Bryce Young.
I mean, Matt, just on pure, Ole Miss is like a 6-7 win team without Matt Corral. Yeah, he's that big of a difference maker. Yeah. And Bryce Young is ridiculous. And that game, I didn't mention the Iron Bowl. I should have, was phenomenal. One of the best Iron Bowls ever. And they don't win it without Bryce Young making ridiculously calm under pressure throws down the stretch. So, where are those two quarterbacks from? JC, what state?
California knows how to party.
There you go. And we could list a number of California players that are starring at other schools thousands of miles away. The point is, right, exactly. There's another one. Not to mention the backup quarterback at Georgia, who everybody thought would be starting this year. The point is, a guy like Lincoln Riley is going to get those players to stay in state. And he's already gotten decommits from Oklahoma to go that way. So my point is that this is not just a money grab move. I don't think I was wrong in that assessment. Yeah, the money's insane, but they were already making insane money, and they could have still made insane money if you hold the AD's feet to the fire. What is he going to say? No, we're not going to match that. Is Notre Dame going to say, well, we're going through some tough financial times? Are the big donors at Oklahoma going to say, nah, I don't think we're going to spend the extra $3 million a year or whatever? No, they could come up with the cash. These were moves not based on that. These were moves based on next level. But we haven't had this. To have two programs of that level lose their coaches to other college jobs, this is cataclysmic, and I think it sets a new bar for how little stability there is. If you love your coach, and you even can match the money, they still want the chance to win at the highest level. One other point, and then I'll get out of here. To me, there's two other big questions. Is Riley afraid of the SEC? I don't buy that. Some people will use that. It's a common take. I don't think that's it. Why USC over LSU? Well, for the reasons I just stated. Think about this. Southern Cal's last three coaches all failed and got fired. That's what you're following. Path of least resistance, JC, hashtag. You're following three guys that couldn't get it done. Lincoln Riley's like, okay, I can get it done. Or you could take the LSU job, where the last three coaches have won a national title, and two of them, they couldn't wait to fire them. So that's why, to me, you take Southern Cal over LSU if you're Lincoln Riley. Why LSU if you're over Notre Dame would be the other one. And as I mentioned, Brian Kelly realized I can only take Notre Dame so far. LSU is going to give me first-round draft pick defensive lineman every year, and now I can go into that playoff and look at the other sideline and say, I got you now. I can match you per talent, per player, and now you're going to see what Brian Kelly can truly do. Those are my thoughts on the two major moves.
Yeah, and I think this, there's a couple of things that work here, and I'll start with the Notre Dame LSU thing. First and foremost, people were talking about Dave Aranda, they were talking about Mel Tucker, they were talking about these other guys taking LSU, and the great coaches and all, and certainly deserving of a mention for that gig, Mike. But that does not fit the MO of the athletic director. These athletic directors have MOs, and this Scott Woodward guy, who, by the way, is home. I mean, A&M, LSU, athletic director job. Texas A&M is a really good athletic department. They're full of money. But he's home. He's a Baton Rouge guy. He's the LSU guy. So he comes home. You look at his track record. Everybody said nobody could hire Chris Peterson from Washington or from Boise State. He hired him at Washington. Before now, the most groundbreaking, strange hire or impressive hire from one Power Five to another was taking Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. And this is even different because Jimbo Fisher was 6-6. He had some personal issues that he needed to get out of Tallahassee, and the administration failed him. He had a reason to leave. So he hires Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. He hires Buzz Williams, which was a great hire that made sense. Buzz was a Texas guy, and he's at Virginia Tech and had taken them far in the ACC. But you still got to go do it, and great hire there, in my opinion. They'll win eventually. And he gets to LSU. He's got a baseball opening. He hires the Arizona coach who's been to the College World Series, and I think won one, if I'm not mistaken, or at least played for one. And then women's basketball opens, and he hires Kim Mulkey from Baylor. Again, a Louisiana person coming home. So this football job opens. He's not hiring a big name. Dave Aranda has been great at Baylor, right? But Matt Rule won in year 2 at Baylor. Art Briles won big at Baylor. I mean, Baylor's not something that it's like, oh my God, you took North Texas or whoever to the playoff. I mean, it's that Baylor gig's pretty sweet, and Aranda, it's only his second year. He made a good offensive coordinator hire, and that's why they turned it around. Mel Tucker, to me, despite his connections at LSU, was just not a guy I thought he would go hire. So if you're a Michigan State fan, Hope you enjoy spending that $100 million. Because I don't think there's any chance in hell he was getting.
I never thought that either. I don't know who they were bidding against.
But a big name. And so you heard Lincoln Riley with LSU. You heard some Lane Kiffin talk, all this stuff. Brian Kelly's caught a lot of crap for how he left because Notre Dame could still make the playoff. And I'm not defending like the logistics because it obviously in those types of situations, it could have been handled better, not getting to the media, that kind of thing. You question the timing of the move, all that stuff. You just completed a heck of a season at 11-1. You could still make the playoff. You got a bowl, whatever. Doing it by text is never good. But I'll tell you this. I used to cover I got a plaque in here somewhere. High school basketball when I was a young reporter in Gainesville, Georgia, near Lake Lure, where I used to live and you're at, Mike, or close to. And East Hall High School had a loaded team full of juniors in basketball, got boys basketball. They rolled with 31-1, won the state, right? Everybody's coming back the next year. They're about to two-peat, and their coach was this guy named Seth Vining, great guy. I think he's retired now. And so, and we kind of got to know each other, got to be friends during the run. And so I go and I interview him like, Seth, you got all these guys coming back. And he looked at me and he's like, well, JC, I need to tell you something. I'm taking the job at Lakeview Academy across town, which you go from talent to no talent to a complete rebuild at a private school. And we were talking, I was like, well, you had this team coming back or whatever, and he's like, well, in coaching, one thing I've learned, and I've always remembered this, guys, is when a job opens that you want, or you are offered a job that you want, right? And LSU obviously is a job Brian Kelly wanted. You can't wait because it may not be open. If you say, well, maybe I'll wait till next year and go after it. That guy that gets that job may be there 20 years. He may be there 6 months. You never know. It's a gamble. So you got to go take it. When it's a job you want, you got to go take it. And, and there's something to be said for that with Brian Kelly. Number two about Brian Kelly, and he's not Mr. Personality. I don't think anybody's ever mistaken him for that. He's not a jerk, but he's not Mr. Personality. This isn't some guy like Jim Harbaugh said about Ryan Day that was, born on third base and thinks he hit a triple. And that was funny, by the way. We'll talk about that later.
Great line, yeah.
But this is a guy that coached for like 10 years at Grand Valley State, man. And then he took Central Michigan, right? And then he took Cincinnati, cradle of coaches, right? And then he got Notre Dame, okay? So it's not like some guy that hadn't paid his dues. And, Brandon Marcello from 24/7 Sports, I think you mentioned it too, Mike, that basically looked at Notre Dame and said Notre Dame cannot win a college football playoff national championship, which there's a way they can do it, and I'm going to get to that in a second. He said, I've taken it as far as I can go. I'm the winningest coach in the history of the same place that Newt Rockne coached, and Ara Parsegian coached, and Dan Devine coached, and Lou Holtz coached, and Tyrone Willingham. I'm just kidding. Tyrone Willingham did coach there. Bob Davie coaching football at Notre Dame. Those guys. Boy, they've had a lot of bad hires there too. Winningest coach in the history of Notre Dame football. I mean, wow. So what else is there to chase? If you come to the conclusion, I can't get the athletes to go compete with these big, fast guys from the SEC or wherever. I can beat everybody else, but the Clemsons of the world, the LSUs of the world, the Alabamas of the world, I have no chance. You want to go someplace you can, or you want to go to the NFL, which he almost did at a couple of points. And it's not like he's some ringer. He's not like Todd Graham, who used to go from job to job to job. This guy has paid his dues. I mean, again, Grand Valley State for 10 years, winningest coach in Notre Dame history. What else is there? Okay. And so for that, I kind of want to give him a break for it. And that's nothing against Notre Dame, because I did feel for those players. I've watched Notre Dame play a lot this year. The girlfriend is a Notre Dame fan, so we watch a lot of their. I've been very impressed with the team, even after losing some folks last year. It's not that they're bad, but they're kind of like that team that you rank sixth every year, seventh. Oh, and let's get to Notre Dame. There's truly elite, Notre Dame. And so I kind of give him a break for the way he handled it, just because, if he hadn't been a guy that clearly has paid his dues, if this hadn't been like what he saw as his opportunity to cap a great career where he paid his dues, and all that, I may feel differently, but I don't vilify him for leaving. I think it's a little unprecedented. I don't think anybody's ever left Notre Dame for another college job, if I'm not mistaken, like straight away from Notre Dame to another one, without getting fired or Oklahoma either. Huh?
No one's done that at Oklahoma either. I mean, that's why to circle back. I mean, that's why this is such a landmark day. And I'll say one thing on your Brian Kelly point. People are so just like they want their pound of flesh because Brian Kelly left when he did and how there's no good way to do this, folks. With the new signing day, and you're not going to stay around for the bowl game or the playoff. Like, I just, you either think that all these coaches are inherently evil, or this is just how the business is run. I don't like it either. I wish this wouldn't happen. I hope they back up the signing day. I wish the contract stipulated that you couldn't do it, but that doesn't exist. So then it becomes a contest from people in our profession. I'm more outraged than anyone else over this. You think you're mad? I'm really mad. We see this on social issues. They call it virtue signaling, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, I hate that guy more than you do. I hate his bad deed more than you hate him because I really stand for good. Like, just stop it. Stop grandstanding. Like, we get it. You don't like it. I don't like it. But it's the nature of the business. Lincoln Riley is poaching players left and right from the Oklahoma recruiting class. Like, Brian Kelly said he's not going to do that. He said had an interview on Dan Patrick earlier today, and he pointed. I give Brian Kelly credit. He was honest. He said, "Look, every coach has a wandering, not a wandering eye, but every coach is curious." So he said, I didn't have a wandering eye this year, but you're always curious and you're always listening. Those agents, and when people like Lincoln Riley say, my first conversation with Southern Cal was Sunday morning. Come on. The way it works is you channel all the information through the agent, through a third party. And if any of us in our professions have the opportunity to take a job that pays us twice as much, 3 times as much, or to accomplish a bigger, we see it in media all the time. Guys are jumping networks for better jobs. JC, I don't know what the main competitor is for 24/7 Sports, but if they offered you 3 times your salary and a company car and whatever, you might be tempted to leave the old site. Saying. That's just and anybody is like that. Now, most of us never know that kind of opportunity, so it's hard to even relate to it. You could be the top real estate agent in your market, and you might not get another real estate company that offers you 3 times as much as what you're getting. So I find all that stuff comical when people just go out of their way to tell you how awful it is, and then we circle back to how bad the college athletes have it. Look. Now that there's a transfer portal and NIL, I don't want to hear it. No more. I'm not crying tears anymore. And if you're wondering why coaches are making so much money, because they're the CEOs of the athletic department. They're more important than the athletic directors. They carry more weight than the ADs. One final thought on Mr. Big Game Hunter himself, Scott Woodward. Great AD, did some great things, as you mentioned. First off, it's a heck of a lot easier to hire coaches and go big game hunting when you're at LSU than opposed to, say, Vanderbilt. You right away have things in your corner that 99% of ADs don't have. You have something you can sell that is greater than what other ADs can sell. But let's not lose sight of the fact he got turned down by Jimbo Fisher, and in all likelihood got turned down by Lincoln Riley. Mm-hmm. So then the question was, who was going to be choice 3? And what we'll never perhaps know, and I go back to my little friendly wager with Andy Staples and some other people, I thought Lane Kiffin would say no. I don't know if they ever kicked the tires on Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was trolling LSU.
He was.
Putting a picture of Twitter of his rental car or whatever with a Louisiana license plate.
Crazy.
That told me he ain't going. He's just having fun. He's loving life in Oxford. He could win 8 games there next year, and he still could be the mayor of Oxford. You can't do that at LSU. You go 8-4, 8-4, 8-4. You're looking for a job. So I just thought that was interesting as well. But it goes to show you, even the top jobs, you don't always get your number one choice. But he did a hell of a job with choice 3 or 4, whatever it is. And I think it's a great fit for LSU. Good luck to the new Rudy of Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
And Coach Brian Kelly.
And I'll say, it was a heck of a contract for Brian Kelly. I think that money or no money, it's about opportunity and winning and competing at the highest level, winning that national championship. The last 3 coaches that have been there have won one. And I thought it was a little odd fit-wise because Brian Kelly's sort of been in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. For those of you that don't know, Notre Dame is Indiana. It is. It's in South Bend, Indiana, right near Chicago, sort of near the lake up that way. So he's been right kind of in that area near where I live his whole career. And I started thinking about it. So I did some research, and I looked at going back to Jerry DiNardo, with the exception of Coach O, who was an internal promotion. LSU sort of looked to the Midwest for their coaches. DiNardo, Saban was at Michigan State, sort of a Cleveland Browns coach, and coached at Toledo and all that kind of in this area. He's from the West Virginia portion of Ohio, or the Ohio portion of West Virginia. So he's kind of Rust Belt. Les Miles, even though he's at Oklahoma State, is a Michigan man through and through, and so it's funny when you look at that job, guys, that for one of the last 5, they've kind of looked to folks from this area, and that's different. You wouldn't think that, you'd think everybody'd be a lot like Coach O. And so I thought that was interesting. When I started thinking about fit, I was like, well, this does follow their MO a little bit, and so that's the point there. Own Lincoln Riley. And, I don't think he's ducking anything at all. I do think that there are certain adjustments they're going to have to make at Oklahoma, regardless of who the coach is, when they transition to the Southeastern Conference. I think Oklahoma is a top 10 program. Obviously, it's right there. But you've really got to look at the contract and what Southern Cal did. And look, I've had no faith in their administration since Carroll left. That the folks out there seem to just kind of go, who does Pete know? And then it's like, who does Lane know? And then we'll just stick with Clay Helton. The new AD came from Cincinnati. I thought, they'll probably get like a Luke Fickell guy, which nothing against Luke Fickell, he's good. But USC has what I call caged animal syndrome, right? You want to know what that is? Alabama had that when they went and said, we're going to get Nick Saban no matter what. Even though they got turned down by Rich Rodriguez before they went and got him, they were like, after that happened, they were like, look, man, we're not taking no for an answer, whatever it takes. I think to a certain extent, it happened quickly, but when Florida got Urban Meyer, I thought that was it. And, nobody knew that Urban was sort of a short timer or anything. It looked like he was going to win there forever. To kind of Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, I thought, because they went through your Brady Hoax and all those guys. And it's like, Harbaugh's the one guy that makes sense. And that's taken him 7 years to get on the cusp of the playoff, but he's there, and he made a lot of sense. He's like, well, he's going to bring Michigan back, that kind of thing. And so, some schools make those type of hires, and the blue bloods of the world do. Eventually, if Mike Norvell doesn't work out at Florida State, they're going to do it. And eventually somebody's going to get their act together at Miami and actually go hire Lane Kiffin. So that's what I call it. But if you're Lincoln Riley, you're 38 years old. You've got girls, kids, wife, whatever. You're from a town called Muleshoe, Texas. Population 5,000. You're a walk-on at Texas Tech and then became a student assistant. You're the OC. You lived in Greenville, North Carolina as the OC for a few years. Bob Stoops hires you. You get handed the Oklahoma job, and you're all of a sudden winning, right? So you got to think, are you going to be a lifer or are you going to go and say, all right, well, what can I do that's even better than what I'm doing now? Is it going to get better at Oklahoma or, is the challenge of going to the SEC that's good? Or do I want to take over a job? And I quote, a good contact of mine, Mike, when we were talking about these jobs last time, pointed this out that, he felt there was no better job when it's done right than Southern Cal. And a lot of people in college football feel that way. And college football is better when they're good because there is talent in California. And you look, and you mentioned quarterbacks earlier. Man, oh, man, oh, man. I mean, you look at all these guys from the West that have headed east. You mentioned Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud at Ohio State, J.T. Daniels. Even Cade McNamara at Michigan is from Reno, Nevada, and that footprint. And that area has just been hemorrhaging players to the South or to Ohio State, the Midwest, or whatever. He's going to bring all that back because there's enthusiasm and stuff like that. I mean, there's just really, USC being up is huge. And he's a guy that can create that kind of energy. It's a fresh face. It's a guy that's won at the highest level in college football before, that's been to playoffs. He runs an exciting offense. He's got a good staff. And again, I'll get back to the kid from Muleshoe, Texas. And I respect people that do this because Oklahoma could have been in his comfort zone and he stays there for the rest of his career, right? No problem. Or until he got fired if they go to the SEC. But, you get offered this. Okay, Lincoln, you're building a house, so it's not really a good time for you to move. How much is the house appraised for? What's the listing? Well, it's this. Well, we're going to give you $500,000 over that. We're going to give you $500,000 for the house you currently live in. Then we're purchasing you and your family a $7 million home in Bel Air, right? We're going to give you $110 million salary on your contract, all the resources you need for your staff. And, oh, by the way, your family and you both have access to a private jet to fly anywhere in the world you want at any time. How does that sound? I'm like, well, let me talk it over with a wife and I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I mean, for somebody that looks at opportunity and for a kid from Muleshoe, Texas, who was a walk-on, who just happened to know offensive football, who worked in Greenville. I've been to Greenville, North Carolina. 5 years there under Ruff and McNeil, at ECU. Probably making about $100,000, at tops. 38 years old, young family, bright lights, big city, storied program. You bring that back, your legacy is not only complete, your grandkids aren't going to have to work because of the money. And it's LA. So one of the entertainment capitals of the world. So Mike, we always say there's money, there's oil money. I'm going to add another one to it. There's also Hollywood money. All right. Yeah. and a California private school putting that kind of cash out for a football coach, I know makes some people around that state feel squeamish, but it shows you what Southern Cal can do, what USC can do when they say, all right, enough is a freaking enough. All right. We're tired of this. We're tired of getting our butts whipped by Arizona State. We're tired of losing. We lost to UCLA 62-33. We're fixing it once and for all, no matter what it takes. And there you go. So, is it kind of interesting that about 3 months ago, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma started offering every kid in Southern Cal getting Southern California high school level and getting commits at Oklahoma? Is it an interesting kind of talking point to consider? Maybe. I don't know that it was intentional. Oklahoma always recruits California, and they probably saw an opportunity with SC being down and Oregon being disappointing. But that's another guy I don't really blame for going and chasing that kind of dream. Much respect for Brian Kelly because it's the last job he'll take. You go and you just see if you can win a championship, because that's national championship, major college level. That's what you're missing. For Lincoln Riley, I think it's a completely different opportunity. I think it's something like I said, for a kid from Muleshoe, Texas, to get out of his comfort zone, out of the Big 12, Texas, Oklahoma kind of thing, go to the other coast and say, all right, I'm here in LA. It's almost like the American Hollywood dream, only he doesn't have to audition or do carpentry like Harrison Ford before he gets paid. So kudos to him. And people may be mad and everybody may be like, oh, these big mean coaches, and they don't care about the kids. Well, you know what? The people saying that are the people that pushed, you know how hard it is for coaches now, because you have to recruit your players constantly or they're going to jump in the portal. And you know what? If you lose enough of them, you're going to get fired. All right. So I can't say that some of these people pushing this loyalty narrative had a loyalty in mind at all when they were pushing all these changes.
There's no loyalty with anybody in college athletics, including the players.
We're here, right?
Including the players. All right, we're way over, so I'm just going to.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. No, that's good. When you're riffing, I back out of the way. It's like when Eminem's got a good rhythm going in a rap off. You don't stop the scratch music. You let him keep going, and you let him win 8 Mile. I'll just say this in 20 seconds on the whole notion, because I heard this 1,000 times after he got the job from many people who I don't respect that cover college football, and even a couple that I do. The whole fear factor of the SEC. How many national titles did Lincoln Riley win at Oklahoma?
Zero.
It's a very similar situation to Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. Even if Oklahoma stayed in the Big 12, Oklahoma was going to be good enough to win Big 12 title after Big 12 title, assuming Texas still spins its wheels into oblivion. And then they'd get to a playoff, and they would likely lose. Badly in many cases. So it's not just the great contract, and it's not fear of the SEC. It's I've done as much as it can be done at Oklahoma. And I think a lot of people might be reassessing that job, quite frankly, of just how good Oklahoma can be. And then you go to Southern Cal, you don't follow the guy that just won a national title. You follow 3 coaches that failed. To me, that it's almost a no-brainer. Anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch and see. And, of course, as I mentioned at the top, as we record this today, right now, Oklahoma, Notre Dame still have vacancies. Michael, bring you back in. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. And it's fascinating stuff to think about and where we are in college football and just, in general, I think there's just this feeling of, are we at the precipice or are we just already in the storm right now of what college football is going to be? Is this an anomaly of a year with the coaching carousel the way that it is? Are we almost at a point where the transfer portal and the coaching carousel is more entertaining than the product on the field? So
it is this time of year.
Yeah, well, I know the coaching carousel always heats up right around now, but as we've detailed, at least since my involvement with the program, this started early. Southern Cal got the ball rolling with that, and over the weekend, I believe during last episode there were 14 openings, and through rivalry weekend. And up to this point, there were a total of 23 openings. Now 15 of them have been filled, and one of them, which again, I don't know what it says about where the program is, but they are considered, a blue blood. We spent a lot of time talking about them last week, but sort of a hire that, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but you guys tell me. Billy Napier getting hired at Florida. Is it exactly what the Gators need? Is it just overshadowed because the Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley stuff was just so huge? It just felt like Billy Napier kind of got, hey, Florida hired their coach. Cool.
Right. It's a good point. I heard a lot of that too. I had a weird situation. I'm calling a basketball game in Gainesville Sunday, and late in the second half, as the Gators are about to win on the hardwood, we're getting reports that some of our guys from ESPN, Mark Schleybaugh, and a couple of others are reporting it's almost a done deal. Well, obviously, I want to announce that before we get off the air if that happens. And we literally had a 45-second what they get off the air type of cue, and we just got it confirmed. And so that's how we broke it at about 1:57 in the afternoon, that it was pretty much a done deal Sunday. Look, here, I heard it was Aaron Murray, who I like and respect, and I've worked with on Sirius XM, a former Georgia quarterback, all-time leading passer in the SEC. And, he was opening up with his thoughts yesterday on that, saying, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a ho-hum hire. Like all these other guys got their home runs, and what did Florida get? Well, look, Dan Mullen was a home run hire, even though he was their third choice. It didn't work out. And people will forget this now, but Will Muschamp at the time was a home run hire. He was the coach in waiting at Texas who just won a national championship. He was an elite coordinator at 3 different places, and a lot of people that wanted him. So they've had their quote unquote home run hires before, and they haven't worked out real well. They weren't going to get Lincoln Riley. They weren't going to get Brian Kelly. So if you didn't hire Billy Napier, who were you going to get? That's number one. Number two, Billy Napier, 4 years, 4 Sun Belt championship games at Louisiana. JC mentioned the track record of Brian Kelly. All these guys start somewhere. Every great coach you see right now at one point was part of a mid-major and had tremendous success there. And you have to be able to, as an AD, judge and forecast, why did he do it? How did he do it? And will it translate at the next level? This is a guy that's kind of flirted, but basically said, I'm not interested in 3 other SEC programs over the years. He was waiting. You could say that Billy Napier was big game hunting. He's very arrogant, like so many of these coaches are. Some hide it better than others. And he felt like, I could just stay in Louisiana, keep going to Sun Belt championships, making good money and enjoying life, or I can wait to the ideal job. If you read, there's a great article in The Athletic about Napier and his quote-unquote process. He is the anti-Dan Mullen in that everything is going to be structured, disciplined. There is going to be an all-in mentality that simply was not there. That's what Florida needed at this time. Is it going to work? Hell if I know. Just like so many of these others, I just don't know, and I gave up trying. But I think based on the market, based on where Florida is, and based on his track record, which is pretty damn good, I think it was the right hire at the right time for Florida.
I agree. And look, I'm a big fan of Billy Napier. Thought, when he got fired at Clemson, that was the right move for Dabo to make. Heck of a recruiter at Clemson. I remember when Billy Napier played quarterback for Furman in the national championship game. All right, this is a kid from Georgia, coach's kid, tough as nails. Really impressed with the program he did at Louisiana. The hesitation I would have is this, right? Florida, and this is one of the reasons I thought Dan Mullen was a pretty good fit at Florida because, who have been the 2 most successful coaches for the Gators ever? All time. Spurrier and Meyer. What were those guys? Very unique personalities. They were different, but very unique personalities, different birds, different style of play than everybody else. And really Spurrier's the only one that's been super consistent. Meyer won 2 national titles and had a 12-win year, but his other 3 years were Outback Bowl, and Citrus Bowl, where he lost to the Michigan team that lost to App State. So he's much more dominant at Ohio State than he was at Florida. So you look at that job, and I love the Florida job. I love the Swamp. I love their fans. I love the talent base. There's no reason why they can't be as good as they have been in the past, but it just has not worked out. So you've hired Will Muschamp, and he did a good job with the structural stuff, recruited pretty well on defense, didn't win enough, got fired quickly. You replaced him with Jim, and that's your first person from the Saban coaching tree. So then you go hire an offensive guy from the Saban coaching tree, McElwain. He didn't run it with a lot of anything that Saban did, come to find out. There was no process. It was kind of laissez-faire, and their offense was still bad. And, he ended up saying he got death threats, and he's fired after two years where he wins the division.
Making up he had death threats.
And he makes and some doppelganger on the internet hugging a shark naked. Yeah, I'm still convinced that played a factor. Nah, maybe not, but I'm still convinced the shark picture played a factor in getting rid
making
of
love to strange mammals is never good for the career.
Just very weird.
We're not saying he did that, but the perception out there could be misconstrued by that picture that there was some amorous activity going on with him and a shark.
Could you imagine like Steve Spurrier having a conversation with Jeremy Fowler? Jeremy, what's that picture with the shark? You think he did it? You think that's it? Anyway, So that's Florida. It's a quirky place. And, they lock arms and sing "We Are the Boys." They got 15 million cheers. You have Mr. Two-Bits. You play the Jaws theme. I mean, the swamp is like a Disney musical on game days about the Gators. I mean, it's a weird, quirky kind of place, and two weird, quirky coaches have won big there. Billy Napier is nothing like weird, quirky anything. I mean, this guy is an offensive version of Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, the guys from that coaching tree. Yes, he did work for Dabo earlier in his career. Yes, he did work for Todd Graham out at Arizona State, different guy. But you look at it, he is structured. And that's that to help Louisiana recruit and set that thing up like a machine. There have been coaches that have tried to set Florida up like a machine. Zook comes in there and takes over a mess. Structured, organized recruiter, this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. Muschamp, those guys. Compared to
Zook
Spurrier,
was a little bit of I don't know if I'd put Zook in the best organized category.
Recruiting.
Ron was way over his
I knew
head.
somebody on that staff, and you need to ask them, like, and maybe not that. And it was kind of a different time in recruiting. Sure. But ask them.
So if your point is he was a good recruiter, yes. Yeah, Ron
ask what they walked into. Well, where's the recruiting board? Well, Coach Spurrier didn't have one. Well, well, who's this guy coaching this position? Maybe we should interview him. Well, no, he's just a guy that Spurrier said played there, and so you wanted to hire him to coach receivers. I mean, now it's a different time. I'm just saying this. I've seen this movie at Florida before. I have respect for the program. I have respect for Billy Napier. My concern with the Gators is, okay, things did not go well this year. Dan Mullen is a butt, for lack of a better term, and some people got on him for stupid things. I don't think it's about any of that. I think what it's about, he should have fired Todd Grantham. He'd still have a job. I don't think it's about any of that. I think it's about one school,
Georgia. Yeah, it's Georgia, and it's the R word that you're very familiar with.
Recruiting. And let me just throw this out at you though. Let me Dan Mullen, who can't recruit, right? 3 classes, 2019, 2020, 2021, 5th, 9th, and 12th nationally. All right. That's good enough. If you can coach on game day. And that's the first part of it that makes me scratch my head. I'm like, it's not like recruiting was bad. They're not stringing together top 3 classes, but he evaluates better than just about half the coaches in the country. I mean, or most of them.
Except for Emory Jones.
So yeah, Emory Jones was something else. But
that's why he's out of a job. If Kyle Trask had another year of eligibility, Dan Mullen might still be there.
The
even
quarterback
with
whisperer
absolutely
of him, to me, Mike, at Florida was not as good as it was previously at Mississippi State or his coordinator jobs, because keep in mind, Kyle Trask would not have started had Felipe Franks not gotten hurt. Okay,
that's right.
He made that decision.
Kyle Trask. I'm sorry to interrupt. Dan Mullen really didn't recruit Kyle Trask. That was what's his name? I think Randy Shannon actually discovered Kyle Trask on a fluke.
What was crazy about it too is Swamp. I keep calling him Swamp Donkey. McElwain. He signed him, right, and. You look at kind of what they wanted to do on offense down there. It was a pro-style system. You needed to throw the ball. When they had Will Greer, they were rolling, right? Great offense. Well, then Will Greer gets hurt. So you go Treon Harris again. And then you get Felipe Franks in there, who's the quote-unquote 5-star. And you watch his film, and you're like, well, big arm. That's about it. Needs work. Good upside, and everybody's. And you get this kid out of Texas, Kyle Trask, who never even started varsity. You watch his film, you're like, this is the kind of quarterback that Doug Nussmeier and Jim McElwain can make into a Heisman winner.
Right.
He's just buried on the bench. So everybody's doing this Felipe Franks thing until he gets in there. And I kind of thought he would be good. And finally, and lo and behold, there he was. And so that was a problem. I hope to God that Billy Napier does improve the recruiting, that there's enough there ceiling wise to improve it to where Florida fans get happy, because I don't necessarily think there's this huge gap between Florida and Georgia roster wise. I think there was a gap this year. And I think there were some needs they needed to address. So here's the secret. Here's the bottom line. Here's what Billy Napier needs to do. If you're going to improve the recruiting at Florida, right? You gotta stop Alabama from coming and sometimes Georgia, but Alabama mainly, from coming into your state and getting all your fast athletic receivers and players. Florida has been decent, not great at receiver compared to how they used to be, which was elite. And you look at Florida receivers, they're going all over the place, man. So you want to do that, fix the quarterback thing, get the recruiting going, evaluate well, improve your roster, more power to you. I look at it. I look at the offensive system Napier likes to run. It's not that, it's not that it's bad. It's just it isn't the fun and gun or Urban Meyer's spread options. It's nothing unique. Nothing like Mullen was running last year with Trask and those guys. So I hope Gator fans.
Dan Mullen's. Yeah, that wasn't Dan Mullen's main. What Dan Mullen really likes to do is what he did this year, which is a whole lot of zone read with a running quarterback. And he tried it with Emory Jones, and then he was hoping Richardson would be the future. Kyle Trask landed in his lap. Kyle Pitts landed in his lap. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem. And you mentioned the recruiting rankings early. I'm pretty sure this year they were on pace for in the 20s. So
things were not going well this year.
They were not going well.
They're 12th in the SEC. So
12th in the SEC in recruit. How do you get to that point? And that's why Dan Mullen is out of a job. I mean, that, and of course, how you spiral so far out of control where you lose 5 consecutive SEC games, 2 of which to 6-6 teams. You struggle to beat. Yeah. You struggle to beat Samford, and then you celebrate. Like, it's okay to be quirky and odd and all kinds of just bizarre when you're winning, and you beat Georgia the one year you beat them. But I think the administration looked at that as that was an outlier, and that the recruiting, Dan Mullen this is not Mississippi State. It's just a different deal. And unfortunately for Dan, and look, you and I have been doing this for I've defended Dan Mullen multiple times. Yeah. And I honestly never thought it would get to this point so quickly, that Dan Mullen would go from an SEC championship game where they played Alabama as good as anybody did in 2020, not even close, to 2021. They can't beat below average to mediocre teams. They spiral completely out of control. And Dan Mullen looked like a guy who was in desperate need of a hug for about 6 weeks. I never thought that would happen. But again, considering what was out there, they needed a guy that's going to be a relentless recruiter that has just a tenacious work ethic. And I don't think Dan Mullen fit any of that. And when you look at the future and Dak Prescott's come around once every 30 years. He landed on that, and it was great. And he overachieved at Mississippi State, and it was great. But you always talk about the DNA of a program. I don't know if Dan Mullen's offense per se is the real DNA of what they want there. And they want a little less Emory Jones, a little more Daniel Trask. They want guys who can throw it all over the field and not just on every third down and less than 5. Well, let's run some zone read and every now and then we'll see if Emory Jones can complete a pass downfield. That wasn't working. It wasn't looking good. So
you better have Tim Tebow or Dak Prescott if you're going to,
if you're going to do that, and you better have Percy Harvin and to throw it to like Tebow had, and NFL tight ends, one of which who got in a little trouble, you got to have that type. I just didn't see that happening with Dan Mullen at Florida, and that Georgia game. If you watch that Georgia game, now granted, this is a ridiculously talented Georgia team. If you watch that Georgia game, of the starting 22 from each side, where did Florida have an advantage in talent? Like, how many positions on the field was Florida better than Georgia? That combined with the upcoming lackluster recruiting class was immediate cause for major concern, and they put their pedal on the gas, like, let's abort, let's get out of this thing.
I just hope Billy Napier and the Gator Nation, because just like every other school, college football is better. Nobody likes to see the swamp half full, right? Yeah. Because quite frankly, Mike, when that stadium's not full, it's not the swamp. It doesn't feel like it, And when it is full, it's one of the best home fields in college football. So I hope they're right. I hope he upgrades the program.
It's a 50-50 shot, JC.
I've had a lot of faith in him as a coach. I just I've always believed that Florida gig is a strange fit, and maybe they're kind of coming out of that right now, and because they are building facilities and investing and trying to get they've got their infrastructure is caught up or whatever, but I wish them the best. That is the
X factor,
and I think that it's weird watching. I'm not going to say anything about Florida losing South Carolina, but I think it's weird watching Florida lose to Missouri.
The Missouri one was the nail in the coffin.
Road in a weird game, or give it up 52 to Samford or whatever. Oh, yeah. Congrats! By the way, one more thing: Greg Knox, who was the interim for the Gators against Florida State. He's been around the league, Auburn, Mississippi State, some other places. Congrats to him. And to the Gators, really, for getting up off the mat and beating your in-state rival, who
that was the bowl eligibility bowl.
Yeah, again denied bowl.
What was once a top five, what was once two top 10 teams going at it.
And I wish you well in the Gasparilla Bowl. I think that's where they're going in Tampa against probably Gus Malzahn and UCF. So good luck. Maybe Greg Knox can go to 2-0 as the interim with the Gators.
All right, guys. Well, I do want to get back into some more of the coaching carousel stuff, but let's actually talk about some of the product on the field for a little bit here. We did see Georgia hold up their end of the bargain, and Alabama as well, by scratching and clawing their way to an epic come-from-behind victory over Auburn to set up a top 3 matchup in the SEC championship game this week. We saw Oklahoma State get a huge win over Oklahoma, setting themselves just outside of the playoff scenario, and Michigan for the first time in a decade knocking off Ohio State, putting themselves in there as well. So let's discuss what happened this past weekend and where we may see things this time next week as we look forward to the playoff being set.
Well, I've already said what I meant on Michigan. I think we're all in agreement on that. Secondly, the other one that stood out to me, I mean, Auburn, Alabama was a phenomenal game, but the ultimate result is what we expected, and it sets up an incredible SEC championship game, which we can talk about later. Bedlam. I really enjoyed Bedlam. I thought that was a great game. Of course, I had no idea that Lincoln Riley was going to leave for Southern Cal a few hours later. But Oklahoma State, and by the way, Mike Gundy, who rubs a lot of people the wrong way for whatever reasons, Mike Gundy's done just look at his track record in Stillwater. He's done a hell of a job, and that is not an easy place to coach. It is simply not. But they finally have a defense. That coordinator is going to get G'd up. So you have a defense and you have your typical Mike Gundy offense, and they finally got it. A few questionable calls late in that game, by the way, if you were watching. But they got it. If they go ahead and beat another top 10 team in Baylor this weekend, you can't convince me that committee is not going to look, if it comes down to it, I jumped the gun because I thought Oregon was actually going to take care of business against Utah, and this wouldn't even be a Cincinnati discussion. But if Oklahoma State finishes 12-1 with their quality wins, you can't convince me they're not at least in the running to leapfrog undefeated Cincinnati should they beat Houston, which is not a given, by the way. I'm not counting Oklahoma State out of the playoff. Everybody loves the warm and fuzzy story that is a Group 5 team getting in. I think Oklahoma State's a warm, fuzzy story if they can get in and win this thing. So those are just a couple of the things that stood out. The playoff rankings came and went. It's the same noise. But I think that committee is going to have a really interesting decision to make if chalk plays out, and we have to go ahead at number 4 spot. They could really sweat that one out a little bit. That's the only thing that becomes intriguing at that point with the final rankings to me.
Yeah, that's Mike Gundy. Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40. And look, if he doesn't make it and Cincinnati makes it ahead of him, I think that's awful. Nothing against Cincinnati. I think that there's some scenarios where they deserve to be in, right? Came down to them in Notre Dame, for example. But you go through a Power 5 conference like that, that if the Big 12, if the name on the front of their jersey was Texas or Oklahoma, there's no way they put Cincinnati in over those guys.
No.
So, Brand, now I'll say a couple of things about Gundy. Go back to 2011. You remember Oklahoma State was in position to go to the BCS title game. Ended up being Alabama LSU rematch, and the media at that time was obsessed with scoring points. Thought SEC football was boring, whatever. And that Oklahoma State team would have gotten slaughtered by LSU. I mean, yes, they would have scored 10 points, but they didn't play in defense. So 35 at halftime for the Tigers. Oklahoma State's playing defense now. and they are a complete – they talk about the eyeball test with the committee and all this crap. They are a complete football team. This is not a 71-70 type of shootout, Big 12, outscore you kind of deal. And I'll tell you why. A few years back, I noticed Duke started getting players on defense. And I was like, watching Duke football, then Cutcliffe coaching in front of 5,000 Dukies. They're playing Wake or whoever. And I'm like, man, they're good on defense. I was like, when did this happen? Because you associate it with, Cutcliffe's going to throw it, scheme it up offensively. You got guys going to the league from Duke on offense, but their defense is what hurts them. And it's like, man, oh man. And I started noticing, I look at their box scores. They would hold good offenses under 200 yards a game. I'm like, wow. And they would recruit good defensive players. They'd evaluate well, send them to the NFL. And I never kind of looked and see who the D coordinator was. It was a guy named Jim Knowles who Mike Gundy hired. And Mike Gundy can hire assistant coaches now. He's really good at this. And this guy is a mad scientist, right? I was reading an article about him, I think in The Athletic, about his background. He was the head coach at Cornell. He played at Cornell. He's from Philly. So he's one of these Northeastern guys, latched on with Cutcliffe, was the D coordinator there during their best run at Duke. And now he's at Oklahoma State. And he's a guy that they talked about what he does. He locks himself in his office for a day to do his game plan. He's real popular with the players, whatever. That guy's a difference maker. People talk about Brent Venables probably maybe taking the Oklahoma job. If I'm Dabo Swinney and I'm looking to hire from outside, this is the first guy I'm looking at. I think he's a star. So my point of all that is Oklahoma State is a complete team. And they are not only just scoring and running their offense or whatever, they're playing defense. If they do beat Baylor this weekend, I think they absolutely deserve to be in the playoff over Cincinnati and whoever else. As far as standing out to me, the Iron Bowl, I felt bad for the Auburn people. I felt bad for the grief that Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator at Alabama, took after that game because Auburn's defense dominated them in a lot of ways. What Alabama fans have to keep in mind, and I was on the air in Tuscaloosa today talking about this, that drive is one of the most legendary drives in Jordan-Hare Stadium in the history of Alabama football.
Okay? Absolutely.
And you don't engineer that. Bryce Young did not go engineer that himself. He was phenomenal, but somebody had to dial it up, right? Alabama has not had scores, final scores, performances, whatever you want to call it, in all the phases that we are accustomed to and that we've been accustomed to for, 13 years? 12 years. And I know that's uncomfortable for Tide fans, but I'm going to tell you what. Sometimes it's better just to win and to come out with a close one, because that means you've responded to adversity and it's made your players better and it's a life lesson or whatever, than it is to blow people out, because I think it takes more gumption to go. I mean, that game was over, guys. Auburn, I was sitting there going, man, they're going to lose at Auburn for three straight times. And then what? Do they let them back?
Well, Tank Bigsby ran out of bounds. Otherwise, it would have been over.
Yeah.
That's a just monumental mistake. They also threw a pass to stop the clock in a key. I mean, Brian Harsin had a lot of, and Mike Bobo, who's no longer the OC.
Yeah, Mike Bobo.
They had a lot of questions to answer. As good as Alabama was at the end of that game, Auburn gift wrapped it in a lot of ways.
And I think too, it was a hey, oh God, we're about to win, and you get a little anxious. And you're like, well, let's just throw a pass and end it. And then, Tank, his mistake was a mistake guys make. I mean, but I just think that, that was impressive that Alabama had the gumption to get up and go do that at a place they'd lost 2 in a row as a program. So what does that mean for this weekend? I don't know. I'm looking at the spread at 6.5. Georgia minus 6.5. Georgia's blowing everybody out. Okay, I do think there's some matchups there that Alabama can exploit. Alabama, it's almost going to be like an opposite type of approach that you're used to seeing against Bama, where it used to be Bama had the big old defense and these teams that would just go really, really fast would give them fits. I think Alabama's going to have to do that to Georgia to win. And I think there's a reason the spread's 6.5. If I'm a dog fan, I mean, you've probably got a playoff berth wrapped up regardless. You need to get this off your back. You need to get this Alabama thing taken care of.
Yeah. I promise you this: Georgia fans are not looking at it like, well, we're going to be in the playoff anyway. Like this is personal. The last 3 times they played Bama and Saban, they blew double-digit leads at the half. And let me throw some other numbers at you real quick. I know we got to move on to the next topic because we got to get JC to one of his many caravan interview spots. He's a wanted man. He's a popular man, and so we got to pick up the 4.340 pace here.
Oh yeah,
Georgia is a 6.5 point favorite, as you mentioned. Alabama, nobody cares about the FPI index. I get it, but they have been an FPI favorite in their last 91 games. Wow. They haven't been an underdog, and I forget what it is, the number, like 80 games, give or take. The last 5 times Nick Saban's been an underdog. 2008, they were a 4-point dog to Clemson. They beat the Tigers 34-10. 2008, they were a 6.5 point dog to Georgia. They beat the Dogs 41-30. 2008, they were a 10-point dog to a Gator team that won the title with Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer, and they did lose that one. And then later in the title, the SEC championship game, 2009, 4.5 point dog to Florida. They beat them 32-13. That was when Bama basically usurped Florida as the team in the SEC. 2015, the last time that Alabama was an underdog. Think about that for a moment. That's 6 years, folks. They were a 1.5 point underdog to Georgia.
I remember this game.
If I'm mistaken, that was in Athens, right?
Yeah, and it was raining, and they beat the crap out of them.
It was raining, and it might have been a white out or a blackout, something out, whatever they came up with it between the hedges. They beat Georgia down 38-10. So I'm hearing a lot of, what it's like here, JC. You lived in Atlanta for a while. The local radio, I mean, there's a lot of Georgia fans that are pounding their chest. But if you really get beyond that bravado deep down, the Georgia fans I know that are honest with themselves when they look in the mirror, this game is scary. And I'm going to tell you what, Georgia hasn't really been challenged all year long. I mean, Georgia hasn't had that blank moment that most national championship teams have had to have, where they're all of a sudden, oh my God, we're down 2 scores. Oh my God, all of a sudden we're down a touchdown in the fourth quarter. They haven't had that. It has been the most non-perspiration type regular season that we've seen in a while for Georgia, or for that matter, the SEC. Alabama is not going to get shook, folks. They're not going to get shook. They've had to grind out games this year. They haven't just beat the pants off everybody like they normally do. So I'm just telling you, I would pick Georgia to win. I've seen both teams several times. Georgia is a better, more complete team, no question. But by no means, when I looked at Saturday's game, like I'm hearing a lot of people say, well, we're clearly the better team. We should act like it and should be confident. I don't think I'd go into it with that mindset. If I'm Georgia or if I'm a Georgia fan, I think Alabama is going to be a worthy competitor on Saturday in the lovely Dome in downtown Atlanta.
Yeah, this is why you hired Kirby Smart to replace Mark Richt. It is because Georgia, when they were in these situations before, had a tendency to fall flat on their face and not get the job done. Now, look, folks, you can't use the transitive property for the SEC championship game. Don't get caught up in that. You're going to be careful. It's going to come down to matchups. And then, yes, Georgia is the better team. I will tell you that right now. Georgia beat you compare scores, my goodness, there's no comparison. 37-0 versus Arkansas versus a touchdown win. 27 versus Florida versus a 2-point win. 24 out of Auburn versus the Great Escape. They both beat Tennessee pretty good, but don't get caught up in that. This is like a reverse weird Alabama could get upset back in the day thing with the way Alabama can run tempo on offense, their skill. I think the Georgia defense, guys, is like watching a offensive team or a basketball team. Even that defense, it's weird when you see a defense like this. It gets into a rhythm. You have to disrupt their defensive rhythm, if that makes any sense at all. And I think, quite frankly, Alabama, with a combination of scheme and talent, is the only team they face this year that's maybe capable of doing it. But, part of me says Georgia's going to blow them out, and it's going to be a cathartic moment for the Dogs. Part of me thinks – Do you
really believe that? Does a part of you really believe a blowout?
If you look at the results, Mike, it's, don't look at the spread look at the results this year. This is a dominant Georgia team. This is an Alabama team that's played a lot like some Georgia teams over the years, okay?
Good point. Yep.
So, again, as we've seen, though, recently since Kirby got there at Georgia, it's not like Mark Richt where he got blown out except one time. Georgia will give them – maybe they didn't come in with a better resume, but Georgia would give Alabama a game. Alabama would win. So – and I wonder, too, this, and final point on this game because it's the SEC championship game. Final point here – what's going to happen? Georgia's up. Fourth quarter gets there. Bama scores and ties it. Georgia's offense can't go far. Bama gets the ball back. What are the nerves? What are the sideline? What are the fan? What's it going to feel like for these guys? Because it's in their head. I mean, and there is something to be said that certain teams do have mental edges in college football, regardless of player. It's one of those leprechaun things through the years. They have a mental edge. I think Bama has that right now. I think Georgia could very easily break it on Saturday. And look, if you beat them, you don't have to worry about playing them again. They beat you. You got to worry about beating them. Still, that's the Bama thing is going to be hanging over your head in the playoff if you don't beat them. So Georgia can end this thing, go claim their national title, do whatever, if they just go play and beat them in Mercedes-Benz.
I've got a Heisman ballot, and it's a weird year, man. I mean, the top 4 teams, their best player might be on defense. Will Anderson of Alabama might be the best pure player on that defense. Aiden Hutchinson of Michigan is a beast, might be the best player on that team. And Jordan Davis might be the best overall weapon for Georgia, even though he's got 24 tackles and 2 sacks. I mean, he plays the nose. And he did have his fridge moment, which I got a chance to call a couple weeks ago, where he ran the ball for a touchdown, which was cool. But don't lose sight of guys like Nakobe Dean. Their linebackers in that defense get all the big plays, get all the sacks and tackles for loss. Quay Walker, Channing Tindall. It's not just Jordan Davis. He's the picture. He's the face man of that defense. But the front seven is nasty, nasty. And I'll say one other thing for both these teams. Neither one of them's had their feelings hurt by seeing Ohio State get eliminated, because Ohio State had the one passing attack that really could have gone vertical and maybe scared both these secondaries. Michigan doesn't play that kind of game. They are more ground and pound. So that just, to me, increased the chances of whoever wins this game is going to be a really strong favorite to win the national championship.
Sure, yeah. Michigan, thank the weather, because I'm not saying the weather caused. They played a great, inspired football game. Ohio State did not play well. I've watched Ohio State several times this year, though, and on a dry field, no weather. I think, like you said, they're going to get vertical, and that's exactly what I thought about their offense when I saw it. Is, this is a team that can throw over the top of a Georgia or Bama and really make things difficult, sort of like they did to Clemson last year in the playoffs. So I think both are pretty happy to see the maize and blue projected to go rather than the scarlet and gray.
Well, Mike, your discussion there about the Heisman and where things land and how it is a weird year. A lot of defensive players have been in the discussion. Something that caught my eye this weekend was, I guess, the language and the description of Bryce Young and the victory at the end for Alabama. People calling the drive at the end his Heisman moment, which is something that, again, makes it difficult for defensive guys to ever break through on that. When you see a guy get dominated most of the game, but then engineer the drive at the end, and he gets his quote unquote Heisman moment. So just interested to hear both of your thoughts on how we qualify what a Heisman moment is when you're in a game where you complete less than half of your passes.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Look, that's Heisman moment A, but you're not winning it without Heisman moment B. Heisman moment B is Bryce Young balling out in Atlanta on Saturday and defeating Georgia. Short of that, he's not winning the award, I don't think. I'm a big fan of the kid. I am really impressed with Bryce Young overall. That is not your typical Alabama offensive line. That is not your typical, of course, he lost his top wide receiver in the middle of that game. This is not your typical, for a lot of people, for any other program, this was a rebuilding year in Tuscaloosa. But they don't allow that in Tuscaloosa. They don't accept that. But Bryce Young plays like a 30-year-old veteran. He does not play like a freshman. That kid is cool as a cucumber under pressure. But to me, the true Heisman moment, as you worded it, and so many people like to word it, that game is going to be a distant memory if Stetson Bennett and Georgia outplay Alabama. So Bryce Young needs to do it again. And if he does it again, to me, he becomes your odds-on favorite. I think voters are really going to struggle with who to vote for this year because, as I mentioned, so many of the top players are defensive players. Well, as we all know, defense is much more of a collective accomplishment. Like Jordan Davis is not Jordan Davis, again, without Devontae Wyatt next to him, without Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker and those linebackers I mentioned. Same thing at Aiden Hutchinson. At Michigan, they've got stout defensive linemen now in Ann Arbor. They look like a playoff team for the first time in a while under Jim Harbaugh. And Will Anderson of Alabama, he gets to make all the huge plays, but obviously they've got other stars there too. I think it's going to be the most fractured vote in the history of the Heisman Trophy. There's my hot take of the day. It's going to be the most fractured vote in the history of the Heisman, unless, again, Bryce Young goes out there and just absolutely destroys what we are seeing and many people are labeling a generationally good defense from Georgia. If he gets to 30 points and lights them up, you might as well give him the trophy right there in Atlanta. But short of that, I think it's going to be I can tell you this. This is my 15th year as a voter. I've never struggled as much to think of who I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 than I have this year. And I know I'm not alone on that.
Yeah, and I'll just add this real quick. You said it better than I could, Mike. And honestly, I think it's credible because you have voted for 15 years, and we always talk about it, and you never tell me who you're voting for. And
I'm not supposed to.
Okay. I had no idea.
Yeah, we're not supposed to say before the vote. After the vote,
look, I've always respected that because I'm like, I think I know who he's voting for, but no. See, I wouldn't vote for Bryce Young right now at all.
Right.
I'd probably vote for Will Anderson before Bryce Young, to be honest, but right. Or even Jordan Davis. I think this is one of those years where you can say this defensive guy can do it. Especially Davis. I don't care about the stats. People need to understand. You have a nose guard like that in this defense with all that other talent. I mean, it's killer. Mm-hmm. But I'll say this: you go out there. They get to 30 points against this D. They win. He puts up numbers. He's already got 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the year. He's already played great football. Yeah, you got to hand it to the kid from California.
All right, guys, reaching back into the coaching carousel conversation quickly here. Again, I know that we're a little short on time here at the end, but a couple of things that I would like for you to touch on. JC, I know that you actually had some strong feelings about one particular move that was very surprising in Louisiana. So Louisiana Tech decides to part ways with Skip Holtz after 9 years. They've already replaced him with Texas Tech offensive coordinator Sonny Cumbie. So that's part one of the final question here. And then part two will be Urban Meyer says that he doesn't want to coach in college again. He's 57 years old. He wants to commit to rebuilding Jacksonville. Do we trust Urban Meyer at what he says? You
don't rebuild, and that's again the college terms. I'll start with the first thing, and I'll be real brief. I think it's sad and pathetic what happened to Skip Holtz. The bright, shiny object or whatever. And Sonny Cumbie's a hell of a coach, and really kind of no different than what they've had. You go there, you win. During a time when Louisiana Lafayette is good, and LA, Louisiana Tech's a tough job, right? And then, you go 500 in a COVID year, which was weird. And then you have one bad year and you're gone. And Skip Holtz is a great guy and he didn't deserve that. So nothing against Sonny Cumbie. I'm going to pull against them. Are they still called the Lady Texters? I think that's what I'm going to call them from now on for doing that to Skip, who's really one of the good guys in college football. Secondly, on Notre Dame, everybody's talking about Marcus Freeman. I think that's kind of I don't know that he's ready for that job. I think he's a heck of a D coordinator. I think he could be a head coach. I just don't know Notre Dame. People are talking about Luke Fickell. Great fit if other jobs don't come open or another job doesn't come open. I'll talk about that later. Brian Kelly just told you you're not going to win a national championship. So here's what you do. And they're not going to do this, but here's what I would do. I would do some Goodfellas kind of stuff here. I'd get the secret Irish society or whatever their decision makers are called and say, look, he's right, but we're really, really close. Unlike when Lou Holtz took over, we're close. So what we need to do is we need to call Urban, give him whatever he wants to come. His ego is big enough. He will want to be the only coach in history to win a national title 3 straight, and it's storybook if he wins it at Notre Dame. And it's even more storybook if he beats Brian Kelly and LSU doing it. Give him whatever he wants. He's only going to be here 4 or 5 years. We're going to give him some admissions leeway that we haven't given other coaches, that we gave to Lou Holtz back in the day, even though it got us a little trouble. We're going to win a national title, and then he'll leave. We'll clean it all up. We'll raise the admission standards again. We'll have another 30 years of Notre Dame football. We have to worry about this again. And by then, we'll be playing on the moon. So, and Notre Dame will be the first school to play a game on the moon. But that's what I would do. This is the caged animal syndrome you're talking about. I know it's not going to happen. But if I were Notre Dame, I mentioned caged animal syndrome, and they are not that caged, but they are right there. They can touch it. They can feel it. They can smell it, and they just can't get to it. That's the way to get to it.
I think they are in a cage. I like your analogy. I think this is the caged animal syndrome you were talking about earlier with the other programs. 1988 was a long time ago.
I know. It's time to wake up the echoes, Mike.
Oh, 1988 was a long, long time ago. You think about that's the year Ben Johnson got clipped for steroids after beating Carl Lewis.
Yeah.
I bet you many people listening to this podcast don't even know who Ben Johnson is. That's how long 1988 was, the last time they won a national title. And you're right. If they promote the DC, it's got Bob Davie written all over it. We know how that worked. Notre Dame's going to go big game hunting. To me, the top two choices are obvious. It's Matt Campbell. It's Luke Fickell. Pick the order, and you do everything you can to get one of those guys. And if you fall short of that, then you just come up with the best you can on Plan C.
I'd call Urban, man.
Well, I'm not saying they won't. I don't disagree with anything.
I don't think they will. I think it's too controversial.
I think right now it's way too controversial. They will be scolded. You know, the Christine Brennans of the world. Like, there are people
who care. I mean, yeah,
I know.
Notre Dame cares. Notre Dame.
Well, Notre Dame does care, and now there's 1,000 Christine Brennans they've already got the article typed up and written to talk about how awful that move would be and how immoral and unethical and everything else.
But all right. Yeah, you're right.
Again, I'm not laying judgment. I don't care about a guy's relationship with his wife. Like, that's none of my business. But I'm telling you, the disdain for Urban out there is white hot. And
no question.
So I think it's Fickell and or Campbell as the top choice, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to get that guy. Last thing, because I know we got to wrap up. Skip Holtz, we're all JC. You and I particularly a little biased on this. I've known Skip a long time. I've known him for 20 years.
Yeah,
and I'm on my tombstone. It'll say, "Here lies Mike Morgan. He broadcasted games in Starkville, Mississippi, and Ruston, Louisiana. May he rest in peace." So I've been to Ruston. I know what that job is like. And I will say this. There are some big, big money people there. And it's funny you mentioned this in the same sentence when you were talking about Skip, because I think you, in an indirect way, you nailed why he got fired. And I'm with you. I think it was wrong. Tim Brando just went scorched earth on La Tech, and he lives there, or lives near there in Shreveport. He basically said, this is egregious. It's ridiculous. And in a lot of ways it is. Skip Holtz did a tremendous job there and would make a great OC at a Power 5 school. I'll throw that in parenthetically. But they think in Ruston, they don't look at themselves as a cute little program in a remote part of Louisiana. They think of themselves as we should be playing for the stakes that the Power Group 5 teams are. So whether it's Cincinnati or last year, both Louisiana and Coastal Carolina. So when they look at what Billy Napier just did with the Ragin' Cajuns, they say to themselves, we're in Conference USA, which is now, they're picking the bones to figure out what's left out of that. We should be doing that kind of thing. We should be playing for 4 consecutive conference championships. And that's the way they view it there. I've met some of their boosters, big time donors, big. It's not a cute little program for them. It's everything. So the news didn't shock me. Again, I hate it for Skip. I don't think it's necessarily fair, but it's a sign of the times. Everybody looks at the person across the way and says, I want what they have, and we're going to go ahead and make a change to get it.
My son Skip was an excellent head coach at Louisiana Tech University. He's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame. I'm going to put his name in the hat for the job.
That coming from the dad who sold his son out when he blamed the play calling that he made, trying to run a Notre Dame Tony Rice offense, and instead of letting Skip run the spread, which won them 2 Outback Bowls. But I could go on to that story. It's 20 years old, but that's a whole other story.
You're talking about the Christine Brennan thing real quick and all that. Just to wrap this up, it's not going to be any worse than Under the Tarnished Stone. I mean, I don't care what I don't care how many butts Urban Meyer grabs, how many pseudo heart attacks he has, how many daggum pizzas he's eating after
future murderers he recruits.
Yeah. That, like I said, you got to lower the admission standards. It's not going to be any worse than that. Then it's 2021. Come on.
Hey, look, I like I said, you know what we always say on this podcast. We're all about what's good for the sport and what's entertaining to us.
Yeah.
So I don't have to take the backlash if they hire Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer that is like instant TV gold. That is a 30 for 30. That is a reality show. If Urban Meyer right now, with all that's gone on recently and in the past, goes to Notre Dame, it's the story writes it's so good in so many ways. If you don't care about all that ethical stuff, I'm right there with you. I just don't think Notre Dame they don't want another Under the Tarnished Dome book. They don't want a sequel to that.
Keep in mind, I live in Chicago. My life partner here is a huge Notre Dame fan. She won't even let me talk good about them because I'll jinx them or whatever. You talk about the luck of the Irish or whatever. I need that to happen for my life. And then we can sit here and talk about it, and I'll have permission. I need Urban Meyer to come in and say, I'm very glad to be here at my dream job, University of Notre Dame. And his name's Urban Meyer. I mean, if you were going to write a book about it, you would say Urban Meyer or Urban McDougal or some crap like that.
All right, last question for you guys. If it was down to Matt Campbell or Luke Fickell, who would you pick? Oh, I just stumped the room.
I'd pick Matt Campbell. I mean, because I think he can maximize. I love Luke Fickell. I think eventually he'll get the Ohio State job, maybe sooner than later.
Whoa. Easy, big fella.
Don't forget, Chicago Bears are going to have an opening. There's some names out there, Mike.
That's true.
And I think Notre Dame does need a maximizer, because if you're not going to get those recruits, you've got to take what you get and go beat teams. And he's done that at Iowa State. Against teams with, on paper, a lot better players. So, and he's a fantastic football coach. I know they disappointed this year, but I think if I were Notre Dame, that's definitely who I would go with over Fickell. Because I think that when you look at it, it's yes, Brian Kelly and Mark D'Antonio won at Cincinnati, but so did the champion of life, Butch Jones.
Yeah. And I do think for Matt Campbell, he's sort of like the next tier Billy Napier. His name has been mentioned for jobs, and he's been the guy that's going to take that next step so many times it feels the last few years. So, yeah, I think that's the direction I would go as well. Somebody that could be there for a while and continue building. JC, you can speak more to the recruiting analysis of it all, but it seems like he could be a guy that could go and get next-tier players at a place like Notre Dame, even though he's doing 2- and 3-star and developing currently at Iowa State. He could definitely step up.
Yeah, and what you do there is, like, yes, you may not have, like, 5-star guys that you can go get, but you can get and do what they're doing and then go find somebody just as good in the middle of nowhere. And then that way on game day, it's equal. So that's the thing. I'm getting texts from JB and Gold.
All right. It's that time.
We got to wrap it up, folks.
Let's wrap that. We already went over, but there's so much stuff to get to. And we could do another one of these at the end of the week. And we just might. You never know. We're crazy like that. But we got to sign off now. For JC Shurburtt, for Michael Haney, Mike Morgan saying so long. Thank you so much for tuning in again at JC and Morgan.